Rising Tide, the Climate Refugee Crisis. I'd like to thank and commend Ranking Member Grijalva for his leadership in this important topic, which is significant at the personal, community, national, and international levels. The forum will flow as follows. I will turn to Mr. Grijalva and any other committee members when they do arrive. Right now, they are ensconced in taking votes, so we expect that they will be here probably around the half-hour point, between 2 and 3. And each of those members will, of course, make some remarks. In the meantime, we're going to proceed with the remarks of the 4 panelists, which will be the meat of what we talk about today. I'm going to moderate the discussion once we get to that point after the testimony of each panelist. We're anticipating and hoping, panelists, that each of you will stay within about a 7-minute time frame. And I know that that can be difficult, but you're going to have a helpmate, and she is sitting right there, and her name is? Okay. She's going to be holding up cards. And I know from experience when you're talking, you may not be focused on a person holding up cards. In fact, it may be distracting. So don't worry about it, but just keep your eyes open. And if, in fact, you tend to run long, I'll try to assist in getting your attention to try to wrap up. So following the testimony, I'm going to facilitate a question and answer period with the panelists and as well take questions from the audience. We would like this to be interactive. So I'd like to provide some basic framing remarks from my perspective. Many areas of the United States are indeed confronting a rising tide, and in the very literal sense. Some areas along the east and Gulf Coast have experienced an increase in relative sea level of over 1 foot in the last 80 years alone, as measured by NOAA tide gauge observations. This increase in the baseline of sea level relative to the land surface has led to more frequent coastal flooding, which we tend to term nuisance or recurrent flooding. In my hometown of Charleston, South Carolina, we have experienced a 409% increase in average nuisance flood days over the last 50 years. Additional impacts to coastal and inland communities of sea level rise include erosion, loss of habitable land, saltwater intrusion into aquifers, damage to infrastructure, and loss of economic and food security. The effects of a changing climate on our social, economic, and ecological systems is being felt, and not only in coastal and island areas. Today, I anticipate that our panelists will provide not just compelling testimony, but their invaluable firsthand perspectives on the changes they are witnessing, the impacts to their communities and way of life, and the strategies they are considering or even now implementing to confront the challenges and the rising tide. So I would have turned to Mr. Grijalva at this point, but we'll be waiting for that. So I'm going to turn to the panelists at this point. I'm going to give you a brief introduction of each of the 4, and then I'll invite the first panelist to provide his remarks. Junior Aini is Deputy Chief of Mission for the Embassy of the Republic of the Marshall Islands. Junior is right in front of me. Mr. Aini is a 2008 graduate of the University of Hawaii with a degree in political science. He served several years as a Foreign Service Officer with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the government of the Marshall Islands, and currently serves as the Deputy Chief of Missions for the Embassy to the United States, where he assists the ambassador in all issues related to the bilateral relation between the RMI and the U.S. Deme Nakin, to my right, is Tribal Nation Advisor and Elder in the Isle de Jean Charles Band of Biloxi, Chitimacha, Choctaw. Mr. Nakin has played a central role in planning community resettlement since 2010. He grew up on Isle de Jean Charles Island He has witnessed major changes to his community and the environment due to land loss. He is active with a number of civic associations, including an association for families affected by Kulan-de-Vries syndrome, and was an organizer and presenter on the 2015 Isle de Jean Charles Education and Outreach Tour to address issues of land loss and cultural survival. His father was the former chief of the Isle de Jean Charles Band, the Biloxi Chitimacha Choctaw Tribal Nation. Isao Sanak, on my left, bear with me in the pronunciation of names, please, no harm intended, is the Arctic Youth Ambassador for the U.S. Chairmanship of the Arctic Council. Mr. Sanak is from an island called Shishmaref, Alaska. He currently studies political science at the University of Alaska with an interest in rural development. He is 18 years old and very involved in climate change justice and activism, and attended the COP21 negotiations in Paris, France, as part of the Sierra Student Coalition. And lastly, also slightly to my left, in front of me is Colette Pichon-Battle. She's director and attorney of the Gulf Coast Center for Law and Policy. Ms. Pichon-Battle is a native Louisianan who has worked with local communities, national funders, and elected officials around equity in the post-Katrina and post-Deepwater Horizon disaster Gulf Coast. She has received multiple awards and fellowships, including the U.S. Civilian Medal of Honor for the state of Louisiana for her work around multiracial, cross-regional alliance building in the Katrina recovery, and more recently served as a lead coordinator for the Gulf South Rising, a regional initiative around climate justice. So I would invite now Mr. Ainini to provide his testimony.
Thank you, Jeff, for the kind introduction. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the government of the Republic of the Marshall Islands, I wish to thank you for convening this forum on confronting a rising tide, the climate refugee crisis. The Republic of the Marshall Islands is a low-lying nation. Our exclusive economic zone is 2 million square kilometers, roughly the size of Mexico, and our remote islands have no air crown, an average height of above 5 feet above sea level. Plated so narrow you can often stand in the and see the ocean waves on the other side. The Republic of the Marshall Islands and the United States have a long-standing relationship that has spanned over 7 decades. Our relationship has taken us from the end of the World War II, when American soldiers liberated the Marshall Islands, and as proving ground for 67 nuclear tests, to today, where hundreds of Marshallese men and women serve alongside American soldiers, where we have strategic bilateral partnership throughout our joint compact of free association. The Marshall Islands hosts the U.S. Guadalupe Atoll Strategic Missile Defense Test Site, and our citizens, nearly a quarter of our population, are now live, work, and attend school throughout the U.S. In a very real sense, our security is also your security. Climate-driven migration is already a reality in the Marshall Islands, and the future poses far greater threats. This poses security concern over the U.S. and the already evident compact impact, economic burden within the U.S. could be far worse. Both the Marshall Islands and the U.S. have an important bilateral tool in our compact, which, if strengthened and well-focused, could boost our resilience and strengthen our future. We are now realizing a growing rate of out-migration into the U.S. And while there are a wide range of drivers, increasingly we find that concern over climate impacts are influencing mobility. Our local communities struggle to cope with more frequent and more serious coastal flooding. Right now, as we speak, half of our population is experiencing severe drought condition in the Marshall Island. In our culture, the land defines oneself, that without our land, you are not a whole person. The Puginian people know this. They have remained in exile since the US nuclear testing started in 1946. And many were ultimately resettled on Kelly Island, a place which also had a degree of environmental risk than elsewhere in the Marshall Island. As seas have risen, this already vulnerable island is fast becoming uninhabitable. And as the beginning see nowhere else to turn, yet again within the Marshall Island, they have petitioned the Congress to revise their trust fund to resettle within the U.S. This issue is addressed in Senate Bill 2360, currently in the Senate Energy and National Resources Committee. What will be the reply of the Congress? And if this is only a question of one community today, albeit in a unique circumstance, what could happen to the entire Marshall Island within my lifetime and that of my children? We do have a degree of national action to tackle climate in place. For example, enhanced action on disaster risk policies, a detailed national comprehensive development plan, and water security initiative. But at present, our domestic climate action is only fragmented, and our present capacity remains seriously inadequate to tackle future risks. The bilateral comeback agreement is absolutely clear in our right to enter the U.S. to live, work, and study without a visa. However, we hear sharply of comebacking back physical and social challenges from some host states within the U.S., a front-based issue in Honolulu and elsewhere in the U.S. In the next decade and beyond, the scale of climate-driven migration pressure from the Pacific could make this today's impact issue seem quaint by comparison. Climate change is a serious issue, but one of many. We, both the Marshall Islands and the U.S., need to do much better job at jumpstarting economic growth and boosting progress on basic social issues. But the future risks of climate change, even just the economic calculations alone, threaten to wipe the slate clean of whatever progress we may achieve. What then, you might ask, of global action, of the Paris Agreement on climate change, where the Marshall Islands and the US and so many others stood strong of ambitious and far-reaching action. We stand strongly behind it, but we know for in fact that it is not enough, and the built-in timeline to ramp up effort in both fundamental lifeline but also at severe risks. Even if, as we achieve the higher range of ambition and emission cuts, as a low-lying island we still face severe climate-driven challenges, worse than what we see today. Nearly 70% of our national budget mainly comes from the US payments under the Comeback Agreement, and we both nations are still building infrastructure today as though climate change did not exist. While the Marshall Island and Interior Department have expressed interest in prioritizing and building in climate consideration to our comeback with the adoption of Comeback Resolution 2015-2, we already have decades of US-funded investment in place, including Kwajalein military base, all of it highly exposed to climate impacts. The most effective means to address climate is not just through global action, but local resilience in all aspects. The aspect of bilateral comeback expire in 2023, and while we are already one of financial step down, so much more of this challenge is also about achieving positive results with what we already have at hand. To conclude, I will suggest that to stem the tide of climate migration, our mutual consideration of post-2023 bilateral relationship, and indeed our management options now, should directly address climate risks and do a better job to build our resilience. And here, some creative and strategic thought and artwork is truly needed by both nations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Anini. And I would now invite Mr. Nakin to provide his testimony.
Hello, my name is Tamay Nakin. I'm a tribal nation advisor and elder to the Ella Jean Charles Band of Biloxi, Chitimacha, Choctaw. Chief Albert is in New York City meeting with the Rockefeller Foundation and the other recipients of the HUD Disaster Resilience Awards. So I will address the questions that Ms. Guerrero requested we discuss here today. First, I want to introduce you to our tribal nation, our resettlement. Our tribe's ancestors fled to our island in Louisiana to escape the Indian relocation programs of the 1830s. They hid in the coastal forest to avoid being forced to Oklahoma or killed. They were able to fish and work land around our island. They lived off the land. My parents lived on the island, and I grew up there. Over the last 60 years, we lost 98% of our land due to coastal erosion, land sinking, powerful storms enhanced by sea level rise. Our island is disappearing fast. I was forced to move to the mainland because the island road floods, as you can see here. At times, I could not get to work. There are children who miss school because school buses don't run to the island. Just a month ago, they missed 3 days of school because flooding caused by strong winds, which pushed the water up. There were about 80 houses and over 300 people living on the island in 2002. By 2008, only 27 houses and 70 people remain. With every storm, more people leave. It gets harder to rebuild with fewer community members there to offer mutual aid, like in this picture of guys searching in floodwaters. Also, there's a picture from our Christmas parade where we give out toys to children of the tribe. Our goal for tribal resettlement is to recreate our safe and family-oriented community for the residents of the island and reunite the tribal nation as a community like it was when I was a child. This will revive the ties, help displace folks who are still at risk to coastal flooding. For example, this is my backyard last week. The bayou in front of our house flooded over the main road too. So in addition to those 27 families still on the island, our plan includes the rest of our community who have recently been displaced from the island to nearby areas. The island was a paradise, but what made the island a paradise? The people, the tribal community, together as a whole, as one. We want to regain that closeness. Without coming together again, our unique tribal identity will be lost. We are also integrating our community ties, relationships to our environment, and our tribal history into various pieces of our plan. Our tribe wants to return even more of our traditional ways to life. We were self-sustaining. We aim to maintain the knowledge and respect that we had for our coastal environment in our new home. We will bring native plants that were resilient, good for coastal mitigation, and those used as medicine. Our tribal resettlement is an opportunity for transferring what we learn about climate adaptation to our communities, although this has gotten lost in much of the media coverage of our tribal resettlement. We see this as a very important and have already connected to Louisiana educators in order to involve Louisiana students and those from around the world. Elements of our tribal resettlement that will interest others include resilient construction, energy efficiency and independence, land, water development, a health clinic, elder, child care, and farmers market. And our community center with entrepreneurial activities, education opportunities, and a tribal shelter during hurricanes. Refining these elements and learning for more cost-effective application in future communities has a price, which is why the amount awarded is higher than simply to move people. Critics haven't considered the ways in which the tribal resettlement will be a learning incubator. Just like our state coastal restoration agency is testing best practices for restoring the coast. The first pass at a resilient community in coastal Louisiana requires investment. Once developed, the cost of future models will be much lower, inexpensive means over a long time, not just to build in the first place. The biggest thing right now is we do not yet know what HUD and the state of Louisiana plan for the money. It has been 3.5 months since we received the HUD Resilience Award for our tribal resettlement plan. In the media, Louisiana Office of Community Development keeps downsizing our plan, and we think they may turn our resilient tribal resettlement into some kind of public housing. We thought we were finished with the treaties of the 1800s. We hope and pray that this is not another treaty made, another treaty broken. We have tried to resettle for almost 20 years with multiple setbacks. All this planning takes energy, time, and money, which we do not have. The grant applications are lengthy and difficult. We are working class people, do not have the staff to advocate for resettlement. Until there is an appropriate government policy, there is too much risk for communities. Although we have been awarded a grant, we still do not know whether we will be resettling our tribe. We are in limbo. So there is this need for policy framework or program that enables communities to resettle together as a community due to climate crisis. And this is why we all are here. So begin crafting a policy and we will help. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nakin. And I now invite Mr. Sanak to provide his testimony.
Thank you, Quiana. Thank you. Uvlalotak avunga atiga Isa Sanak, Anayukaka, Warren and Bessie Sanak, Kikakdamiu. Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Esau Sanak. My parents are Warren and Bessie Sanak. I come from an island called Shishmaref, Alaska. I am 18 years old and I am an Inupiaq Eskimo. I changed my degree program at the University of Alaska Fairbanks from political science to tribal management in hopes to go back to Shishmaref and become mayor. With all this in the future, with all this experience, I hope to run as governor of Alaska by the year 2030 or 2034 in hopes to represent the rural communities like Shishmaref and the other 223 communities affected by climate change in our state. I'm here on behalf of my people of Shishmaref, the animals that cannot speak for themselves, and on behalf of the indigenous people of Alaska. Shishmaref, Alaska is currently losing 3 to 4 meters of land each year from storm surges, rising sea level, and flooding caused by climate change. With this current trend of climate change, we can see Shishmaref gone within the next 25 to 30 years. Ever since the 1950s, Shishmaref has lost about 2,500 to 3,000 feet of land, way before climate change was widely recognized. My grandfather told me that the ice that surrounded Shishmaref used to freeze around late September, early October, but now, with the rising temperatures, the ice around Shishmaref freezes late November, early December, and that really puts our hold on our winter diet. That means we cannot go out on the ice to go fishing, to go hunt our winter diet like ugruk, which is bearded seal, walruses, spotted seals. In 2014, we saw a very strange winter. In that year, we saw the first rain in winter, which was very strange as we never saw that before in oral history of Shishmaref. And that caused our snow to freeze overnight and let our caribou not get their food that they need. And that really made our caribou a lot skinnier than they are accustomed to. With the later ice freezing, that means we had to buy more food and supplies from the local store in winter in recent years to eat, which I am not fond of because all that food is processed and man-made. My family and people of Shishmaref have been living our traditional Inupiaq lifestyle for the past 4,000 years. We do not want to see any new types of offshore or even onshore drilling in my state of Alaska. Mother Nature is tired of us taking oil from the ground. We saw that with the oil spill that Shell Oil did just a few days ago with 90,000 gallons of oil in the Gulf of Mexico. It's right in front of them that the oil companies cannot see that if they continue drilling oil in the Gulf that it's gonna spill no matter what. It doesn't matter where you drill oil, that it affects us all. It affects the Arctic twice as more than the lower 48. And I'm really scared to see if they do continue with this 5-year offshore drilling plan in the Arctic, because if there is a spill in the Arctic, that means our traditional lifestyle that we've been living for the past 4,000 years will be put on hold, and we do not know when we can eat our animals like we've been eating for the past 4,000 years. We do not know when the oil would be cleaned up, and a lot of families will go starving. One bowhead well can feed 1,000 people. One walrus can feed about 300 people. And a majority of us natives in rural communities in Alaska are way below the poverty line, which means we cannot always go to the store and get what we need to eat for dinner, for breakfast, for lunch. And about 90% of our diet is traditional. It's subsistence lifestyle that we've been eating for 4,000 years. And we just got introduced to this new Western colonization food in 1901 in Shishmaref when the first post office was made. The walrus, the ugruk, or bearded seals, spotted seals, beluga, whales, fish, migratory birds like ducks and geese have been living with us and alongside us for thousands of years. And with the development of an oil rig in the Arctic, that will interrupt their migration path. That means we will not be able to hunt them where we always hunt them. And that means we have to go a lot farther to hunt these animals. And we'll see a very sad seasonal year, or even years of supply that comes from the sea that we might not even be able to eat our traditional sea animals until the spill is cleaned up, and who knows how long that will be. Our culture, our way of life we have been living for thousands of years will be greatly affected if an oil spill occurred, and many families in the Arctic and Shishmaref will starve. I hope that the Arctic will be taking off this 5-year plan, as climate change is not only a political issue to me, it's my future. Kuiana, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sanhok. Okay, our last panelist, I would now invite Ms. Pichon Battle to provide her testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. And Ranking Member Raul Graveria. Can y'all hear me okay? Nope. Better? Okay. And members of the House Natural Resources Committee and colleagues from the front lines of the climate crisis, bonjour, greetings. My name is Colette Pichon Battle. I'm the Executive Director of the Gulf Coast Center for Law and Policy. We're headquartered in Slidell, Louisiana, just north of New Orleans. GCCLP is a nonprofit public interest law firm and justice center working to promote structural shifts toward ecological equity. And we work specifically with communities of color on the front line of climate change from Texas to Florida. Our vision is to achieve climate justice for all residents of the region. My current work is an outgrowth of my personal story. I'm a proud resident and native of Louisiana. I was raised in Bayou Vincent, and I returned home in the aftermath of Katrina to assist with recovery and rebuilding efforts. My family and community have been on the north shore of Lake Pontchartrain since the 1770s. We were hit with a 25 or 30-foot tidal surge off of Lake Pontchartrain, and our elders told us through oral traditions that they had never seen the water so high. There are no levees on the North Shore to protect us. We are adjacent to the Mississippi coast, we're above sea level, and there was nothing we could do to survive that tidal surge. Those engaged in what was then deemed the largest U.S. disaster of our time will never forget the impact of 2005. That year was the most active hurricane season on record. Before and after Hurricane Katrina, we dealt with more than usual rainfall and flooding, hotter than usual temperatures, and various invasive species of plants, insects, and animals. In the midst of disaster recovery, there is not a lot of time to ponder the broader picture. As Bayou folks, we turn to helping our neighbors, cleaning our waterways, and practicing the traditions of coming together and sharing information and to heal. It was not until 5 years after Katrina that I was able to connect the dots and understand the broader picture. While the atrocities seen in New Orleans after Katrina were no doubt painful manifestations of historic discrimination and government failure, many of the experiences outside of that metro area were part of a global trend of extreme weather and climate disruption. The BP oil drilling disaster highlighted the spectrum of the global climate crisis. Extreme energy extraction, including deepwater drilling, is not only an actual hazard for coastal communities, but it is a significant contributor to the large quantities of CO2 in the ocean and in the air. In the course of 5 years, communities of South Louisiana experienced the perils of both extremes of climate disruption of that spectrum. The negative economic, health, and ecological impact of extreme energy extraction, and the political, legal, and social injustices riddled throughout the climate-based disaster recovery. As a member of an historic Louisiana community and as an immigration attorney, one clear connection between the BP oil drilling disaster and the hurricanes of 2005 was the amount of human migration that continues to occur in our region. Thousands of families were forced out of their homes, their communities, and their states to escape to the unknown impacts of the storm. Many of these families remain displaced in cities like Atlanta, Jackson, Baton Rouge, Houston, Dallas, due to a lack of opportunity and infrastructure to support them in their own hometowns after a disaster. In these neighboring southern cities, folks fleeing Katrina were demonized and stigmatized, often with children in new schools paying the price. My first call for legal support after Katrina was a displaced mother whose child was being beaten by the bus driver and being called a Katrina refugee. The term refugee was summarily rejected and replaced, as I'm often reminded by retired General Russell Honoré, with the word survivor. As an immigration attorney, I tried to objectively analyze what was attempting to be conveyed by the term refugee. And the survivors were right. Post-Katrina, the term refugee was being incorrectly used to label folks. A more accurate term would have been internally displaced people. It matters because using one term versus another offers a different set of legal protections and rights. Still, as survivors, defensively differentiated themselves from refugees or non-citizens, the foundation for race tensions amongst Black and immigrant laborers whose income earning potential is disproportionately related to low-skilled jobs was laid. While local families were being moved out, thousands of immigrants were being lawfully brought in to help with the recovery and reconstruction. The Gulf's migration continued in the wake of the BP oil drilling disaster as collar workers tied to the fishing or coastal tourism industries were forced to move from their families to find alternative work outside the region. Our offices provided free legal services and had the unfortunate front row seat to see families forced to seek other economic opportunities and split across the states. U.S. citizens displaced by Katrina, global citizens migrating toward economic opportunity of disaster, and Gulf South blue-collar workers displaced by the BP oil drilling disaster have provided us with important information on the faces of climate-based disaster migration. Of the numbers to return to the region after these catastrophic events, those permanently displaced are often low-income, Black, brown, and rooted in communities often on the front line of climate disruption. The Gulf Coast Center for Law and Policy is now working with partners like the Foundation for Louisiana to assist coastal communities in long-term planning for continued climate disruption. Tribes like the 17,000-member Homa Nation now have to contemplate relocation as a part of their adaptation to the climate disruption and sea level rise. Community elders like my mother, Mary Pishon Battle, are still displaced in places like Dallas from Katrina, and they experience firsthand what happens in municipalities that have not yet made the necessary infrastructure shifts to receive those migrants. Immediate next steps, we'd like to offer some recommendations. We need federal recognition for all state-recognized, not yet federally recognized tribes in South Louisiana. We need sensible immigration reform. Current global statistics show that migration patterns seen in the Gulf Coast from 2005 to 2010 are not unique, but a broader global trend around extreme weather, sea level rise, and socio-political impacts. And we need to invest in renewable energy as well as in equity. And those are the things we would like to put forward to the committee today. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. It is my sincere hope that my words and the words of my colleagues and the experiences of Gulf South residents over the past 10 years will not slip away quietly, but will echo in your ears and hearts as you continue to lead our nation to its next phase of greatness. Thank you.
Okay, first of all, I'd like to have everybody give our panelists another round of applause. This hearing is expected to end at 3 p.m., and I do believe we need to be out of here at that time. So we'll shoot for that, and that gives us 20 minutes. So we will probably, hopefully, have the committee members arrive and they can say a few words. But in the meantime, I'd like to actually kick off a bit of an exchange here with the panelists with a question that I will ask. And then I would like to invite some audience participation. And do we have a microphone for the audience? No? So they would need to come up? Oh, project. Project. Okay, understood. Thank you. So I'd like to ask the panelists, first of all, can you comment on how the impacts and the anticipated actions for your communities and the people that you are serving are being communicated, and the continuing or perhaps evolving perspectives of those persons within the community? What are you seeing today? And remember, you turn on your mic, please.
The impact we have on the island is just eroding so quickly. You can see it every day. And we just need to get our elected officials on board to help us with this resettlement, because there is some conflict between, they're trying to take some of that money from us, and They cutting down the project. That the proposal that was sent in, they cutting back on it tremendously. And but they're gonna have the people on the island that remain. They'll be off there soon with the sea level rise and storms. Some of them are saying 50 years. I don't give them that long. They'll erode that quick. They're building levees to protect some of it, but the island was left out of the Morganza to the Gulf island, on Morganza to the Gulf levee, which is a hurricane protection levee that they're building. And the island is not protected other than a 6-foot levee around it, and that's just not high enough. And the road will erode. I mean, the road's covered. Every strong south wind, the road will cover up. And people have to travel that road to get to and from the island. And we were told they weren't going to fix it again for a storm. So, but what we're here for is support from all of you, whatever y'all could do to support in getting our resettlement done. Make it go through whichever way possible. Stop all the politics. There's a lot going with this. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question. Climate change is real. And as I was mentioned earlier in my statement, Marshall Island is just 5 feet above sea level. And we see almost every year king tides inundation the islands and coastal erosions. And we are the least contributors to the climate change, but yet we are the most vulnerable country that face the impact of climate change. And it will take a lot of effort on our part, but we've done so much on the island, and some of the development that we need, we don't have control over. And we encourage the big country to take a big step to reduce the cost of emissions.
Yeah, I would just add, I would just add, I live in the Deep South with Uncle Nakan, and you know, we live in the area of the country where you can't say climate change. You actually, in Florida, can't say the words. You can't put it on government documents. We live in the part of the country that folks give up on, and we sacrifice the area that I live in to big oil, big industry all the time. We can talk about land being lost, but it gets a little complicated when you start talking about sea levels rising because of climate change. But the truth is that we're losing land so fast in South Louisiana because we're extracting gas and oil out from underneath, and we don't live on bedrock like the rest of the 48. We live on the delta of the, built up by the Mississippi River. So when you take stuff out of that, the land is gonna sink and the seas are gonna rise, and we're gonna lose land, and we are losing land at the fastest rate on the planet in South Louisiana. And we can't talk about it because oil and gas is so strong. Everything that we do is connected to oil and gas. And so in the words of many tribal leaders in my community, yes, there was a benefit at one time, but is it worth the price we're paying now? And what are we gonna change, and how are we gonna change it? I think the ways we've been talking in community are to tell folks we have to have the courage to speak the truth. It's in front of our faces. We can't keep acting like these things aren't happening. We can't act like Katrina was just another storm. We can't act like 2005 was just another hurricane season. And we can't act like we don't see all of these nations, all of these people screaming and screaming for attention and saying, we are not the people contributing to this, but we are the people on the front lines of this. So we found some ways to talk about it in our community that just say, we've got to talk about equity, we've got to talk about justice, we've got to talk about new economies rooted in renewable energy, and we've got to start talking truth.
Yeah, Shishmaref loses 3 to 4 meters of land each year due to climate change, and climate change is caused by the use of fossil fuels and the extraction of fossil fuels. So it doesn't really matter where you extract oil, in the Gulf, in the Atlantic, in the Arctic. It's gonna affect us all. It's gonna affect the Arctic, especially where I'm coming from, and the other 223 communities in Alaska. That means thousands of people would have to leave their land, have to leave their home that we've been living on for thousands of years to somewhere more safe. And we actually saw some families in Shishmaref move away and move to the big city in like Anchorage because of the storms just a decade and a half ago, early 2000s. And we just gotta transition into renewable energies, because that's the only solution to keep Shishmaref afloat, to keep Shishmaref above water, to keep Nutak, Shaktoolik, Kivalina, Nome, Teller, Brevik, Bethel, Barrow, Kaktovik, all these different places in Alaska, plus 223 others, so that we can still be connected to our land, that we do not have to transition and lose our identity as a culture and as a person. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to move up here. I'd like to turn to the audience, and I guess what I would recommend, given that we've got about 10 minutes left and there could be good exchange here, I would hope there'd be a few questions. Rather than provide comments, I would hope that you would direct your questions to the panel so that we can actually hear from them and the richness of their experience. So I would certainly at this point invite any audience questions, and as Bertha said, please project if you have a question. So if you can raise your hand and just identify yourself and then ask your question. All the brave souls out there. Okay, we have a question in the back. And if you would please stand up and identify yourself if you'd be so willing, and then project. And I can repeat your question for you. Okay, you hear that okay? Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So, as you saw on Sunday, or you might have heard of, is that big march that we did to keep fossil fuels in the ground. That's one meeting that one rally that we did. Another one was yesterday at the State Department. I talked for about 30 to 45 minutes to about 20 to 30 people at the State Department, and I think the meeting went really well. And on Thursday, I hope to catch Senator Lisa Murkowski's hearing, and I think that will be end of my week.
I am also with Esau. There is a delegation here from the Arctic, the Gulf, and the Atlantic asking for no new drilling leases, oil and gas drilling leases with the 5-year plan. There was about 1,300 people marching on Sunday. There were about 40 of us walking around congressional offices and other state offices. Yesterday, I was able to meet with the Congressional Black Caucus, letting them know that the issues that they put to the top of their list, education, crime, these things are absolutely intersecting with the current climate crisis. And these things we saw come to bear during Katrina and the BP oil drilling disaster. We've also been able to meet with several other members, including Bernie Sanders' office yesterday. We ran out of a meeting with the White House to be here today. We've definitely come together from the three coasts to say we don't want any more new drilling, And it's time to start investing not only in a different kind of economy, but investing in the communities that makes this country so great.
Okay, any other questions from the audience? Okay, well, I'll ask another question then, and I'm behind you, just so you know where the voice is coming from. One of the experiences I think that we all have, we've seen this, is that oftentimes the way in which we respond is to an event. And sometimes those responses indeed include relocation of affected populations, whether intentional or for whatever reasons and by whatever means. I sense that with what we understand to be happening with the changes in our environment and our climate in particular, that we may be facing an acceleration of certain types of events, frequency, intensity, and the relatively insidious impacts of rising sea levels and ocean acidification. So we see a number of these stressors that are impacting not just our U.S. communities and our partners, but also on an international basis. So I'd ask the panelists to just kind of step your view screen up another level and comment on what you think you have learned that is applicable to the broader, perhaps higher and longer range magnitude impacts that this planet may be facing.
The sea level rise down where I'm from, it's caused by strong winds, erosion. Erosion is, I mean, it's just unreal. On the island road where we went to cross, where you cross, when I was growing up, there was land on both sides of the highway. Now there's none. All there is the road. And what do you do for that? How do you stop it? That's all questions no one can answer.
Mr. Payne, could you repeat the question?
The question is basically, given that we have responded with events and sometimes actually inducing relocation to disaster events typically, I sense that we are in a conversation now which is meant to be a more proactive conversation as to how we get out in front of what we would expect to be more frequent and higher order, greater magnitude events. So what I'm looking for is how would you advise we view this changing dynamic in terms of our response?
Well, I think the issue with the climate change and its impact has to do with the global collective effort on that part. And I also mentioned in the statement that we also need to effort on the local levels, and because we have a very close relationship with the U.S. under the compact, and we are only 7 years away to renew the compact, and I think discussion on the climate change should be also a priority for the relationship that we have with the U.S. And I think that should be a really big topics to discuss when we do the negotiation.
I'm often speaking about what's happening in the Gulf South from the disasters that we've experienced and the lessons that we've learned. So surprisingly, one way I would describe where we are right now is opportunity. We have an opportunity to, as the folks in my Creole community would say, set things right, to put things in balance. We could keep putting CO2 in the air, putting methane in the air, helping things to melt and communities to go underwater. We can keep doing that, or we can have the courage to actually do the things that we already have the science, the technology, and the traditional knowledge to do. Sometimes you just have to consume less. Sometimes you actually have to stop doing things. And when we bring the earth back into balance, not just with the natural systems, but we bring our communities back into balance with each other. This climate change isn't happening because one industry or another. This is happening because we live in a globe that is rooted in systems of oppression that sacrifice one thing over another, and we're seeing the imbalance that that causes. In order to combat this issue, we're going to have to deal with the natural impacts of climate change, but we're going to have to also deal with the human systems that got us in this imbalance in the first place. And so while we're looking to bring CO2 levels down, let's look to get, let's stop racially profiling folks and putting them in jail. It's that same extractive mentality that's got us into this situation, and we've got to take not one step back, but maybe 10 steps back to watch what we're doing as a human population and put ourselves back in balance with the earth and with each other.
To answer that question, I think that we should not continue drilling oil, that we should not make these new leases in the Gulf, and to put more, we have to keep it in the ground, that we have to transition into a more renewable type of energies. And if they do continue with this 5-year plan with the Arctic and Gulf, we could probably put those leases towards renewable energy leases like wind turbines or all that types of different good stuff. And another way that we could help is to take all the members of Congress that don't believe in climate change out of office, because I invite every single one of you to come to Shishmaref, to come to Alaska, and see what the effects of crude oil is in Alaska. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to use some my time, 1 minute left for some parting comments, but first I want to thank the panelists. Please give them a hand. So I would again like to thank Congressman Grijalva, ranking member of the House Natural Resources Committee, for his endorsement of this panel and his leadership in sponsoring, hopefully, we would have heard special insights from him had he been here. It would have been wonderful. But we recognize that the votes are important as well, and we do appreciate both the committee staff, their leadership, as well as, of course, the ranking member and other interested committee members. This is a most compelling and important social and environmental issue, and perhaps one of the most compelling of our time in the context of a changing climate and impacts on communities. I'm a firm believer in the power of communication and engagement and education. Very good. And the importance of accurate and trusted information for decision making. Without this basis, we are less able to understand and to act with confidence. That is why I applaud the purpose of this forum, and I would be pleased to see the conversation and the needed leadership, which just walked in the door, continue. So, we do have Congressman Grijalva here now, and would you like to say a few things? Please.
Thank you very much all. We have this Pavlov's dog mentality. Those bells go off and we all run off to the floor, and I apologize. I wanted to be here and welcome all our panelists and thank them sincerely for being here. The topic important, more than important, given what's going on in the Gulf Coast here in our own continental United States, what's going on in other parts of the world, and the fact that there is an accepted reality, both based in science and fact, that climate change is real, that humankind has a role, a significant role in its creation, and has a significant role in how we create adaptation for it, mitigate, and in the long term, learn to live with. And so today's panel was important because the phenomena that people are talking about is just an outgrowth of inability to come to grips with climate change and to deal with it effectively, and that is the climate change refugees all over this country, all over this world. 14 million, if I'm not mistaken, is the number that I read. And I mention that because with the economic change that'll occur as a consequence of climate change, with the impact on third world nations and poor communities across this country and across the world, the impact will continue to be larger. So it is both a climate issue of major proportions, an environmental issue of major proportions, but it's also a humanitarian issue of major proportions. And I hope that from the panelists today, you got some of that insight about the reality of people on the ground, knowing what this is. And I hope that as policymakers, that we reach a point where sticking the collective heads of Congress into the sand is not going to solve the problem. And I hope we learned that being assertive and aggressive from our administration and future administration on this subject is vital and important. And that the international community is a partner, not someone that we ignore through the process of creating our own policies. There's a connectivity all the way through this. And part of it is the climate change refugees, the impact on their lives, on their lands, on where they are from, and the impact on those receiving the economic refugees. And let's not, they're both economic and motivated by climate change. So I want to thank you. It is a continuing series of discussions that we hope to get more breadth and depth into issues that are significant to the environmental community and to the community at large, and more importantly, to provide a forum of education and hopefully an impetus for some action and some results. So with that, thank you so much for being here, and to the panelists, my regrets in not being here to hear your presentation. I'm glad that I made it to say thank you and goodbye. Thanks a lot.